The room went silent the moment my name was announced. I could feel hundreds of eyes on me, some curious, some confused, and a few already uncomfortable. My ex-husband stood at the altar, smiling, confident, convinced he had already won. He believed this was his final humiliation of me. What he didn't know was that the song he forced me to sing would expose everything he spent years hiding. And before the last note faded, the wedding would collapse in a way no one there would ever forget. Breathing pause. This wasn't just a song. It was a confession, a revelation. And the moment I opened my mouth, some guests began to cry, while others wished they could disappear. I hadn't heard Joseph's voice in 2 years. Not since the divorce papers were finalized. Not since he shook my hand in a lawyer's office like we were strangers who had never shared a bed, a life, or 7 years of promises that slowly turned into silence. So when my phone buzzed that afternoon, and I saw his name on the screen, my first instinct was to let it ring. I stared at it, as if it were something alive, something that could still hurt me if I touched it. For a moment, I considered blocking the number. I had rebuilt my life carefully, like someone stacking fragile glass, one piece at a time. Peace was new to me, and peace is easy to break. But curiosity is louder than fear. I answered. Claire, he said warmly. Too warmly. That alone made my stomach tighten. I didn't respond right away. I waited, forcing him to sit with the silence. It was the first time in years I didn't rush to make things comfortable for him. I hope I'm not interrupting, he continued. I just wanted to talk. Those words felt unreal coming from him. Joseph never wanted to talk. He wanted control. Talking was just the tool. Finally, I asked, "What do you want?" There was a pause. Then he dropped it casually, as if he were inviting me for coffee. "I'm getting married." The room seemed to tilt slightly. Not because I still loved him. I didn't. But because part of me had always wondered who would come after me. Who would inherit the version of him the world adored. "That's good for you," I said, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. "Thank you," he replied. "Emily is incredible. You'd like her." That sentence landed heavier than he realized, because I already knew what liking Joseph led to. Then he cleared his throat. "And actually, that's why I'm calling." "Here it comes," I thought. "I want you to sing at the wedding." I laughed. A short, disbelieving laugh that escaped before I could stop it. "You're joking." "I'm not." My fingers tightened around the phone. "You want your ex-wife?" I said slowly. "To sing at your wedding?" "Yes," he answered without hesitation. "I think it would be powerful. A sign that we've both moved on. Moved on. From the man who once told me my voice was too emotional. From the man who shut the bedroom door when I cried and turned the TV louder. From the man who convinced everyone else that I was the unstable one. I told him no. Immediately. Firmly. And for a second, I thought the call would end there. Instead, his tone changed. Subtle. Measured. Cold. "Claire," Joseph said, "don't be difficult." That phrase sent a chill through me. I knew it too well. He reminded me of how he supported my music career, how he paid for my first recordings, how he introduced me to the right people. He spoke as if my success had been a favor. Then he lowered his voice. "There are things," he said, "I've never told anyone about you." My heart skipped. "People still ask me why our marriage failed," he continued. "I've been very kind. But if you refuse, I might finally be honest. Honest. His version of honest. The one where my exhaustion became instability, where my silence became guilt, where his control disappeared entirely. I felt the old fear rise in my chest. But something else rose with it. Anger. Quiet. Focused. Clear. "Think about it," Joseph said. "It's just one song. Just one song." After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at the wall. I knew what he was doing. He didn't want closure. He wanted a performance. One last moment where he could stand tall, admired, while I proved to everyone that he had broken me, and that I was gracious enough to sing through it. That night, I barely slept. But by morning, my decision was made. I would sing at his wedding, not because he threatened me, but because for the first time, I realized the stage was finally mine. For most of my life, I believed strength meant surviving quietly, not making scenes, not asking for too much, not letting anyone see how deeply something hurt. That's how I survived my marriage to Joseph. By the time our divorce was finalized, I had perfected the art of appearing calm, while everything inside me collapsed in slow motion. Friends would say things like, "You're so strong," or, "At least you handled it with dignity." They didn't know that dignity, for me, had become another form of silence. So when Joseph threatened to tell the truth about me, something inside me snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, but decisively. I didn't panic. I didn't cry. I sat on the edge of my bed and asked myself a question I had avoided for years. What if this time I didn't stay quiet? Joseph assumed my fear still belonged to him. He thought the woman who once apologized for his anger would immediately fall back into line, that I would protect his image the way I always had, even after the marriage ended. But he misunderstood something crucial. I wasn't afraid of what he might say. I was tired of what I never did. The truth was, I had already lost everything that mattered. My reputation had survived worse whispers. My heart had survived worse wounds. And my voice, the one he tried to shrink, had survived him. That night, I took out an old notebook, the kind with worn edges and pages stained by tears and coffee rings. It held lyrics I had written over the years but never sang aloud. Songs that were too honest, too uncomfortable, too dangerous for a marriage built on appearances. I flipped through the pages slowly. Every line carried a memory. A door closed too hard. A card declined at the grocery store. An apology I never owed. And suddenly, I understood exactly why Joseph wanted me at that wedding. He didn't want forgiveness. He wanted control of the ending. He wanted to stand at the altar, admired and unchallenged, while I confirmed to the world that he was generous, evolved, and impossible to resent. He wanted me to sing his redemption. That realization changed everything, because if he wanted a performance, then I would give him one. The next morning, I called him back. I waited until my voice sounded calm, pleasant even. "I'll do it," I said. He didn't hide his satisfaction. "I knew you'd come around," Joseph replied. "It'll mean a lot to Emily. She thinks it's incredibly mature of you." Mature. That word used to trap me. "I'll need to rehearse with the sound system," I added casually, "and I want to see the final program." "Of course," he said quickly. "Whatever you need." He was too eager to notice the shift. After we hung up, I smiled for the first time in days. Not because I was happy, but because I was finally in control of something again. Over the following weeks, I prepared quietly. I practiced every day, not just the melody, but the pauses, the breath between lines, the moments where silence would say more than sound ever could. I studied the guest list Joseph proudly sent me, his parents, his colleagues, his old friends, the same ones who once asked me why I was so sensitive. And then there was Emily. Her name appeared everywhere, on the invitations, on the seating chart, on the floral arrangements. I searched her online one night, unable to stop myself. She looked kind, open, unaware, and that almost made me stop. Almost. But then I remembered the version of myself who smiled through dinner parties while slowly disappearing. No one had warned me. No one had sung the truth out loud. If I was going to stand on that stage, it wouldn't be to humiliate. It would be to reveal. By the time the wedding day approached, my hands no longer shook when I thought about it. Joseph thought he had orchestrated my final act of obedience. He had no idea he was handing me a microphone. And this time, I wasn't planning to whisper. The morning of the wedding arrived quietly. Too quietly. Sunlight filtered through the curtains as if the day itself had decided to pretend nothing unusual was about to happen. I lay in bed for a long moment, listening to my own breathing, letting the weight of what I was about to do settle into my chest. I didn't feel nervous. That surprised me. Nervousness belongs to people who still hope for approval. I showered, dressed, and packed my sheet music into a plain black folder. No dramatic outfit, no bold colors. I wanted to blend in, to look harmless, because the most dangerous things always do. The venue sat just outside the city, tucked behind tall trees and a winding driveway that made everything feel secluded, almost secret. White fabric flowed from wooden beams, and soft instrumental music drifted through the open space like a promise of peace. Guests were already arriving. Laughter echoed across the lawn. Glasses clinked. Phones lifted to capture a moment everyone assumed would be perfect. As I stepped out of my car, conversations slowed. Not stopped, just softened. People recognized me. Some looked away quickly, embarrassed. Others offered polite smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. I felt like a ghost walking through a life I no longer belonged to. Joseph stood near the entrance, greeting guests with effortless charm. He looked confident, relaxed, exactly like a man convinced the past had been buried neatly behind him. When he saw me, his smile sharpened. "Claire," he said, stepping forward. "You made it." "As promised," I replied. He gestured toward the stage area. "The sound technician will help you set up. Everything is ready." Everything. That word hung between us. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "Thank you for doing this. It shows growth." I nodded, offering the version of a smile he expected. Inside, something cold and steady settled into place. Backstage, the technician clipped a microphone to the stand and asked what song I'd be performing. "The one Joseph requested," I said. I didn't mention the second page. As the ceremony time approached, I watched the guests take their seats. Joseph's parents sat in the front row, proud and composed. His co-workers whispered and laughed. Old friends scanned the crowd, curious, uneasy. Then Emily appeared. A hush fell over the space. She wore white, delicate and radiant, holding her bouquet like something precious and fragile. Joseph turned toward her, his expression softening into something that looked like love. For a brief moment, my resolve wavered. This wasn't her fault. But truth rarely asks permission before arriving. The ceremony began. Vows were exchanged. Applause followed. Tears were wiped away. And then, the officiant turned toward me. "And now," he announced, smiling warmly, "a special performance by Claire, a dear friend of the couple." Friend. I stood. Every step toward the microphone felt measured, deliberate. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears, not fast, but heavy, anchored. Joseph met my eyes. There it was, the look of triumph. He believed this was the moment where I proved I was smaller than him. I adjusted the microphone, took a breath. The music began, and for the first few seconds, everything sounded exactly the way he wanted. The first notes floated gently through the air, soft, familiar, comforting. A love song, heads tilted, shoulders relaxed. Some guests smiled, reassured that this would be nothing more than a sentimental gesture, proof that the past had been neatly resolved. Joseph exhaled. I could see it in his posture. The tension he hadn't realized he was carrying finally released. I sang the first verse exactly as written. Words about devotion, about patience, about standing by someone through difficult times. Emily's eyes glistened. Joseph's mother dabbed at hers. Everything looked perfect. Then I reached the chorus. My voice didn't rise, it lowered. The melody stayed the same, but the lyrics shifted just slightly, almost too slightly to notice at first. Still poetic, still gentle, but no longer safe. I sang about love that demands silence, about promises that only work one way, about a woman who learns to measure her words so the house stays quiet. A few guests shifted in their seats. Joseph's smile tightened, just a fraction. Not enough to alarm him, enough to register. I continued. The second verse spoke of hands that guide, not protect, of care that feels more like supervision, of a voice that slowly disappears, one apology at a time. A whisper rippled through the crowd. Someone coughed. Emily's smile faltered, then returned, uncertain, confused. Joseph leaned slightly toward the officiant, murmuring something I couldn't hear. I didn't look at him. I kept my eyes forward, my expression calm, my voice steady, because the power of truth isn't in volume. It's in recognition. By the time I reached the bridge, the air had changed. People weren't listening politely anymore. They were listening closely. The song no longer sounded like a blessing. It sounded like a warning. Joseph's jaw tightened. His eyes flicked toward me, sharp now, searching. I met his gaze for the first time, and I didn't look away. The final line of the verse lingered longer than expected. A deliberate pause that made the silence stretch, uncomfortable and heavy. I took a breath, and then I sang the line that made someone in the back row gasp. The gasp came from somewhere behind me, sharp, uncontrolled. It cut through the air louder than any instrument. For a split second, my instinct was to stop. That old reflex, to smooth things over, to apologize for discomfort, tried to surface. I pushed it down, and sang the next line. He called it love when he checked my phone, called it care when he chose my friends. The music continued, soft and steady, as if nothing had changed. But everything had. A woman in the second row slowly lowered her smile. Someone else shifted, crossing their arms. A few guests glanced at Joseph, then back at me. Joseph's head snapped toward me. This time there was no mistaking it. His expression wasn't confusion. It was fear. I could feel it ripple outward. That moment when people realize they're no longer watching a performance, but a confession. Emily's brows furrowed. She looked at Joseph, searching his face for reassurance, for context, for denial. He gave her a tight smile. The kind that says later. I didn't give him later. The next verse flowed without pause. I sang about money disappearing from shared accounts, about being told I'll handle it until there was nothing left to handle. A man near the aisle leaned forward, whispering urgently to the person beside him. Joseph's mother stopped crying. Her hand froze midair. Tissue crumpled between her fingers. Joseph took a step forward, subtle, calculated, a warning. I stayed where I was. My voice didn't waver, and that seemed to unsettle him more than shouting ever could. The bridge approached. This was the moment he didn't know about, the moment I had rehearsed the most. The music softened, pulling attention inward. I lowered my voice and sang. They'll say she's sensitive, emotional, ungrateful, anything but honest about the man beside her. A murmur spread across the crowd. Not whispers now, questions. Emily's hand tightened around her bouquet. Her knuckles turned white. She looked at Joseph again, longer this time, as if seeing him through a new lens. Joseph shook his head slightly, almost imperceptibly. Stop, his eyes said. I didn't. I lifted my gaze and let the final line of the bridge land clearly, unmistakably. If you're hearing this and it feels familiar, it's because it's happening to you. Silence slammed into the space. Even the birds seemed to pause. Joseph stood frozen. Emily's breath caught, audibly. And in that moment, I knew something irreversible had begun. The song wasn't about the past anymore. It was about the present, and everyone there knew it. Joseph moved before the music could reach the next note. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting. No scene. At least not yet. He stepped toward the stage with the calm urgency of a man trying to fix a problem before anyone noticed it existed. But everyone noticed. "Claire," he said sharply, forcing a smile that didn't belong on his face. "This isn't appropriate." The microphone caught it. A ripple of discomfort passed through the crowd. I didn't respond. I didn't even look at him. I let the music carry me forward, because stopping would have meant letting him reclaim the moment. Joseph reached for the sound technician, gesturing frantically. "Turn it off," he whispered. The technician hesitated. People were watching now. Not politely, intently. And no one likes being the person who silences a song that's already telling the truth. Joseph's father stood up. "Joseph," he said quietly, "what is this about?" Joseph froze. That question, simple, direct, hit harder than any accusation. He laughed nervously. "It's just artistic expression. She's being emotional." Emotional, the same word. Emily flinched. She stepped closer to him. "Joseph, what does she mean?" He turned to her, voice low and urgent. "She's exaggerating. You know how she is." I sang over him, not louder, clearer. The next lines cut through the tension like glass. I sang about being told, "No one else would love you like I do." About being isolated slowly, dinner by dinner, comment by comment. A woman near the back shook her head. Another guest whispered, "That's not normal." Joseph raised his voice. "Stop the music," he snapped. This time the technician looked at me. I met his eyes and shook my head once. The crowd reacted before he did. "Let her finish," someone said. Then another voice. And another. "Let her sing." Joseph's face drained of color. This wasn't supposed to happen. This was supposed to be controlled. Emily took a step back from him. Her voice trembled. "Joseph, did you ever go through my phone?" He didn't answer. The silence was answer enough. I reached the final verse. The room felt smaller now, charged, heavy, alive. Joseph stood frozen between the altar and the audience, exposed from every angle, and I sang the line he feared the most. The music faded. Not because it was stopped, but because no one was listening to it anymore. All eyes were on Emily. She stood there, bouquet trembling in her hands, her breath shallow and uneven. The white fabric of her dress suddenly looked too bright, too fragile for the moment she was standing in. "Joseph," she said. Her voice wasn't loud. That made it worse. "Is any of this true?" Joseph swallowed. He glanced around, at his parents, his friends, his co-workers, searching for an ally, a distraction, anything that could pull the attention away from him. He found none. "This isn't the place for this," he said finally. "We can talk later." Later. The word hung in the air like an insult. Emily shook her head slowly. "You said she was unstable. You said she made things up." Joseph reached for her arm. She stepped back. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "Did you ever tell me who I could talk to?" she asked. "Did you ever go through my messages?" Joseph forced a laugh. "Emily, you're letting her get into your head." That was the moment her expression changed. Not to anger, to clarity. She's not talking, Emily said quietly. She's singing. Silence. Someone in the front row covered their mouth. Joseph's face hardened. This is manipulation. Emily's eyes never left his. Then answer the questions. He didn't. The bouquet slipped from her hands and hit the ground softly. I asked you once, she continued, voice shaking but steady, why your ex-wife never comes to gatherings, why no one ever mentions her. Joseph said nothing. Emily turned toward me for the first time. Her eyes were wet, not with rage, but recognition. You're not trying to hurt me, are you? She asked. I stepped away from the microphone. No, I said. I'm trying to tell you the truth. She nodded once. That was all she needed. Emily reached for her ring. Joseph's breath caught. Don't do this. She slid it off slowly. This, she said, holding it between her fingers, is not love. The ring fell. It didn't bounce. It just landed. Final. Unmistakable. No one moved. No one spoke. And in that moment, the wedding ended. For a few seconds, no one moved. It was the kind of silence that doesn't feel empty. It feels crowded. Joseph stood frozen, his hands hanging uselessly at his sides. The confident groom from moments earlier was gone, replaced by a man who had just lost control of his own story. Emily stepped back, away from the altar, away from him. Her parents rose from their seats, confusion and concern written across their faces. Her mother reached for her hand without saying a word. Joseph's father sat down slowly, as if his legs could no longer support him. Someone near the aisle whispered, "Oh my God." Chairs scraped softly as guests began to stand, not all at once, not dramatically, but in waves, like people instinctively distancing themselves from something they no longer wanted to be associated with. Joseph finally spoke. "This is insane," he said, his voice louder now, desperate. "You're all overreacting." No one responded. That was worse. A few guests avoided his gaze entirely. Others stared openly. No sympathy left to offer. The officiant cleared his throat, unsure, then quietly stepped away from the altar. The musicians lowered their instruments. The fairy tale had no music anymore. Emily didn't cry. She took a deep breath, steadied herself, and walked past Joseph without looking at him. He turned, following her. "Emily, please." She stopped. Not to face him, but to say, "I need air." That was all. She disappeared down the aisle, her dress brushing against chairs that moments ago were filled with celebration. Joseph stood there alone. His mother approached him, her face pale. "Joseph, what did you do?" He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I remained near the stage, suddenly aware of my own presence again. People looked at me differently now, not with pity, with understanding. A woman I barely recognized reached out and squeezed my hand. "Thank you," she whispered. Another guest nodded at me, eyes shining. That took courage. Joseph looked at me then, not with anger, with something else. Fear. Because for the first time the room wasn't listening to him. They were listening to the truth. And it was spreading, quietly, irreversibly, from guest to guest. Emily stood near the edge of the property, just beyond the white arches and carefully arranged flowers. From a distance, the place still looked like a wedding. Up close, it felt like the aftermath. Joseph followed her, his steps quick, uneven. The confident rhythm he once carried was gone, replaced by urgency. "Emily, wait," he said. She turned slowly. Her face wasn't wet with tears. That unsettled him. "What is going on?" she asked. "I need you to explain." Joseph ran a hand through his hair. "She planned this. She wanted to humiliate me. Emily didn't react. She said specific things, Emily replied calmly. Things that don't come from imagination. Joseph scoffed. You don't know her like I do. Emily met his eyes. That's what you told her about me too, isn't it? The question landed clean and sharp. Joseph hesitated, just a second too long. Emily exhaled slowly. I asked you months ago why you insisted on managing our finances, why my card stopped working one night. Joseph's jaw tightened. I was protecting us. From what? She asked. Me? He stepped closer. You're twisting this. She stepped back. That song, Emily continued, felt like someone describing my life. Before I even realized it. Joseph's voice rose. You're letting her poison you. Emily shook her head. No, I'm finally listening. She paused, then asked quietly, Did you ever make her feel small so you could feel safe? Joseph looked away. That was all the answer she needed. Emily straightened her shoulders. I can't marry someone I'm afraid of becoming. He laughed, sharp, defensive. You're throwing everything away over a song? She smiled sadly. It wasn't the song. It was the truth you never denied. For a moment, Joseph looked around, as if searching for an escape route. There was none. Emily removed the veil from her hair and folded it carefully in her hands. I'm leaving, she said. Joseph reached for her again. She held up her hand. Don't. Her voice wasn't angry. It was finished. She walked away, toward her parents, toward a future that suddenly looked uncertain but honest. Joseph stayed where he was, alone, and for the first time in his life, unable to rewrite the ending. The venue emptied faster than anyone expected. Not all at once, but steadily. Groups formed and dissolved in murmurs. People gathered their bags, their phones, their dignity, whatever they could salvage from a celebration that no longer existed. Joseph stood near the altar, watching it happen. No one asked him what to do next. No one waited for instructions. A coworker he once trusted brushed past him without a word. Another guest avoided his gaze entirely, pretending to check messages on their phone. Whispers followed him wherever he moved. Did you hear that line about the bank accounts? My sister went through the same thing. That wasn't a performance. That was a warning. Joseph tried to laugh it off. He approached a small group near the drinks table. This is being blown way out of proportion. They looked at him, then at each other. One of them cleared his throat. Man, that didn't sound made up. Joseph's smile faded. His parents argued quietly near the exit. His mother looked shaken. His father looked ashamed. Emily's family left first. Her father didn't even glance back. The musicians packed up. The officiant removed his jacket and left without saying goodbye. The flowers remained, unused. I gathered my folder and stepped away from the stage. A few people stopped me, not to ask questions, to say thank you. I wish someone had warned me, a woman said softly. You were brave, another whispered. Joseph noticed. That hurt him more than anger would have. He approached me, his voice low and sharp. You destroyed my life. I met his eyes. No, I said calmly. I told the truth. What it destroyed was the lie. He stared at me as if seeing me for the first time, not as someone to control, but as someone he no longer could, and that terrified him. By the time the sun began to set, the venue was nearly empty. What remained wasn't a wedding. It was evidence, and Joseph was standing alone in the middle of it. The days after the wedding felt unreal, like waking up from a long, exhausting dream, one you're not sure you're relieved to leave or afraid to remember. My phone stayed silent at first. No angry messages, no accusations, no demands. That silence spoke louder than any confrontation ever could. I went back to my routine slowly. Morning coffee, short walks, long pauses where my mind would drift back to the moment the ring hit the ground. At night, the memories tried to creep in. Not the wedding, the marriage, the years I had spent questioning myself. But something was different now. The memories didn't hurt the same way. They felt smaller. A few days later, messages started to arrive. Not from Joseph. From people I hadn't heard from in years. I owe you an apology. I didn't see it back then. I should have believed you. I read each one carefully. I didn't answer all of them. Forgiveness takes time. One evening, I sat at my piano for the first time in months. I placed my hands on the keys, hesitated, then played. Not the song from the wedding. Something new. Something unfinished. As the notes filled the room, I realized my hands weren't shaking. That surprised me more than anything else. I learned later that Joseph had tried to explain himself, that he told people I was bitter, manipulative, unstable. The difference now? No one was listening. The story no longer belonged to him. One afternoon, I received a message from an unknown number. It was Emily. "I left," she wrote. "I wanted you to know. You saved me." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I replied, "You saved yourself. I just sang." That night I slept deeply, without rehearsing arguments, without rewriting conversations. For the first time in years, my silence felt peaceful, not forced, chosen. And I knew. The hardest part was over. Months passed. Life didn't transform overnight into something perfect, but it became honest, and that made all the difference. I started singing again, not for approval, not to be understood, but because my voice finally belonged to me. Joseph faded from my life the way lies usually do, slowly, then all at once. People stopped mentioning him. Invitations stopped arriving. Doors he once walked through effortlessly began to close. I didn't celebrate that. I didn't need to. Karma doesn't need applause. One afternoon, as I was leaving a small cafe after an open mic night, someone stopped me. A woman I didn't know. "I was at that wedding," she said quietly. I didn't say anything back then. "But your song changed something for me." Her voice cracked. I left him 2 weeks later. I hugged her without thinking. That was when I understood something important. That song wasn't revenge. It was release. I never saw Joseph again, and I didn't need to. The power he once had over me vanished the moment I stopped protecting his image more than my truth. Now, when people ask me if I regret singing at his wedding, I smile, because that was the day I didn't lose anything. I found myself. If this story made you feel seen, if you've ever stayed quiet to keep the peace, or if you're still finding the courage to speak, like this video, subscribe to hear more stories where truth wins. Comment voice. If you believe silence should never be forced, your story matters, and sometimes all it takes to change everything is one song.